What if I told you that in 1997, a child was born who spoke fluently in a language that hadn't been heard by human ears for over 5,000 years? What if I told you that this wasn't just baby talk or gibberish, but perfect, grammatically correct ancient Sumerian, complete with dialectical variations that only the most elite scholars could recognize? And what if I told you that this child's story didn't end with fame or scientific breakthrough, but with something far more sinister? Today, I'm going to tell you about Mira Ashkenazi, the girl who was born speaking the language of the dead, and the terrifying truth about what happened when the ancient world tried to reclaim her. It was 3:57 a.m. when Dr. Sarah Ashkenazi gave birth to her daughter at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. Sarah, a linguistics professor at Columbia University specializing in dead languages, expected nothing more than the usual newborn cries. Instead, what emerged from her daughter's throat were sounds that would chill her to the bone. Not because they were inhuman, but because they were impossibly perfectly human in a way that shouldn't have existed. The first word Mira spoke wasn't mama or dada. It was lugal, the Sumerian word for king. But it wasn't just the word itself that shocked the medical staff, it was the inflection. The precise pronunciation that matched recordings of how ancient Sumerian was believed to have sounded. This was no coincidence. This was impossible. By the time Mira was 6 months old, she was constructing complex sentences in what Dr. Elena Marchetti, the world's leading Sumerian linguist, would later confirm was not just ancient Sumerian, but a specific dialect from the city of Ur, dating to approximately 3000 BCE. Mira didn't speak English. She didn't respond to English. She existed in a linguistic bubble that had been sealed for 50 centuries. The medical community was baffled. Xenoglossy, the ability to speak a language never learned, had been reported before, but always involved modern languages, languages the person could have overheard or been exposed to. Ancient Sumerian was different. It was dead. Completely, utterly dead. The last native speaker had died before the pyramids of Egypt were even conceived, Dr. Marchetti arrived at the Ashkenazi home when Mira was 8 months old. She brought with her recording equipment, ancient tablets, and a deep skepticism that this was anything more than an elaborate hoax. What she discovered in that cramped apartment would change her life forever. Mira not only spoke Sumerian, she spoke it with cultural knowledge that shouldn't exist. She referred to gods by names that appeared only in the most obscure cuneiform tablets that hadn't been translated until the 1980s. She described rituals, spoke of places, mentioned people whose existence had only recently been confirmed through archaeological discoveries that weren't public knowledge. But it was during the third week of observation that things took a darker turn. Dr. Marchetti was recording Mira's speech when the child, not yet a year old, began describing something that made the linguist's blood run cold. In perfect ancient Sumerian, baby Mira was recounting what appeared to be a first-person memory of a human sacrifice at the ziggurat of Urart. The details were horrifyingly specific. She described the smell of burning cedar mixed with blood, the weight of gold jewelry being pressed into her small hands, the feeling of stone steps beneath her feet as she climbed toward an altar. She spoke of priests with shaved heads chanting her name, not Mira, but Ninsuna, which Dr. Marchetti recognized as the name of a Sumerian priestess queen who had supposedly lived around 3000 BCE. As Dr. Marchetti delved deeper into historical records, she made a discovery that she would later claim haunted her dreams. In recently translated tablets from the British Museum's collection, there were references to a child priestess named Ninsuna, who had been sacrificed to ensure the fertility of the kingdom. But these weren't just dry historical accounts, they contained detailed descriptions of the child's final words, her pleas to the gods, her promises to return. The tablets described how Ninsuna, as she was being prepared for sacrifice, had sworn, by the god Marduk, that her spirit would find a way back to the world of the living. The priests had been so disturbed by her fervent declarations that they had sealed her body in a special tomb designed to prevent exactly that kind of spiritual return. What made Dr. Marchetti's hands shake as she read these translations was that baby Myra had recited, word for word, the exact same phrases that these ancient tablets claimed Ninsuna had spoken 5,000 years ago. Phrases that had never been published, never been shared outside of a small circle of cuneiform specialists. As Mira approached her second birthday, her behavior began to change in ways that terrified her parents. She would wake up screaming in languages that predated Sumerian, guttural sounds that seemed to emerge from the very depths of human prehistory. She began drawing symbols that Dr. Marchetti recognized as proto-cuneiform, the earliest form of writing known to humanity. But more disturbing were the physical changes. Mira's eyes, originally blue like her mother's, began developing gold flecks that formed patterns resembling the star charts found in ancient Mesopotamian temples. Her hair, once blonde, started growing in with streaks of white that formed intricate patterns that matched the ceremonial scars described in accounts of Sumerian, Priestesses. Dr. Sarah Ashkenazi, Myra's mother, began experiencing her own disturbing phenomena. She found herself waking up with cuts on her arms arranged in cuneiform symbols. She would discover sand in her bed, despite living on the 15th floor of a Manhattan apartment building. Worst of all, she began having dreams where she saw her daughter not as Mira, but as a small girl with gold jewelry and ceremonial robes, walking up stone steps toward an altar where hooded figures waited. In the summer of 2000, exactly 3 years after Mira's birth, an archaeological team working in southern Iraq made a discovery that would send shockwaves through the academic world. While excavating near the ancient site of Ur, they uncovered a tomb that had been deliberately hidden beneath later construction. A tomb that matched exactly the burial chamber described in the British Museum tablets. Inside, they found the mummified remains of a young child, no more than 2 years old, surrounded by gold jewelry and ceremonial objects. But what made international headlines wasn't the wealth of the burial, it was the condition of the body. Despite being over 5,000 years old, the child's remains were perfectly preserved, as if she had died only days before. Carbon dating confirmed the age, but medical examination revealed something impossible. The child's brain tissue was still intact, still showing electrical activity when connected to modern monitoring equipment. The archaeological team, led by Dr. James Whitmore, immediately classified the discovery and restricted access to only a handful of researchers. What they didn't announce publicly was that the child's DNA, when tested, showed genetic markers that were identical to samples taken from Myra Ashkenazi, not similar, identical. As if the child in the tomb and the child in New York were the same person. By 2001, Myra's condition had deteriorated dramatically. She had stopped eating modern food, accepting only items that Dr. Marchetti prepared according to ancient Sumerian recipes reconstructed from cuneiform tablets. She spoke exclusively in ancient languages, now not just Sumerian, but Akkadian, Proto-Elamite, and dialects so old that they existed before the concept of written language. But it was her drawings that provided the most chilling insight into what was happening. Myra would spend hours creating detailed architectural plans that Dr. Whitmore's team recognized as perfect blueprints of the tomb they had discovered in Iraq. She drew maps showing the location of objects that hadn't yet been uncovered, described rooms that the archaeological team would find months later. Most disturbing of all, she began drawing images of herself, not as Mira, but as the ancient child. In ceremonial robes, in these drawings, she was always walking toward a doorway filled with golden light, while behind her, a modern city burned. Dr. Marchetti made the connection first. The ancient tablets didn't just describe Ninsuna's death, they described her prophecy. The child priestess had declared that she would return when the world had forgotten the old gods, and that her return would signal the beginning of a new age, where the ancient powers would reclaim dominion over humanity. In December of 2001, exactly 4 years after Myra's birth, the archaeological team in Iraq made their final discovery in Ninsuna's tomb. Hidden beneath the child's body was a chamber containing thousands of cuneiform tablets, tablets that shouldn't have existed because they were written in languages that predated any known form of human writing. When Dr. Whitmore's team managed to translate a portion of these tablets, they discovered something that made them immediately shut down the excavation and classify all findings as top secret. The tablets weren't just historical records, they were instructions, step-by-step guides for transferring a human consciousness across time, for calling a spirit back from the dead, for opening doorways between the ancient world and the modern one. The tablets described Ninsuna not as a victim of sacrifice, but as a willing participant in a ritual designed to preserve her consciousness until she could be reborn in a time when the world was ready for the return of the old gods. They detailed how her spirit would inhabit a child born to parents connected to the ancient languages, how that child would serve as a bridge between worlds, and how her awakening would trigger the return of powers that humanity had forgotten. Exactly 3:47 a.m. on December 20, 2001, exactly 4 years to the minute after her birth, Myra Ashkenazi disappeared from her locked bedroom in Manhattan. The room was found filled with sand, the walls covered in cuneiform script that glowed with a faint golden light before fading. The only trace left behind was a single gold coin bearing the seal of ancient Ur. That same morning, the mummified remains of Ninsuna in the Iraqi tomb crumbled to dust, leaving behind only empty ceremonial robes and the lingering scent of burning cedar. The official story released to the press was that Myra had suffered from a rare neurological condition that caused her to mimic sounds she had heard her mother studying. The family, the story claimed, had relocated to Europe for specialized treatment. Dr. Marchetti was quietly reassigned to a research position in Romania, where she was forbidden from discussing her work with the child. Dr. Whitmore's archaeological site was declared unstable and permanently sealed. But those few who knew the truth began experiencing their own strange phenomena. Dr. Marchetti reported that she would wake up speaking ancient Sumerian, reciting prayers to gods whose names she had never learned. Members of Dr. Whitmore's archaeological team found themselves drawn to museums containing Mesopotamian artifacts, standing for hours before stone tablets as if listening to voices only they could hear. Most disturbing of all, reports began surfacing from around the world of other children born speaking ancient languages, a girl in Tokyo who spoke perfect ancient Egyptian, a boy in London who conversed fluently in Linear A, the undeciphered script of the Minoan civilization, children in Mexico City who chanted in languages that predated the Aztecs. Each child displayed the same pattern, perfect fluency in dead languages, cultural knowledge that shouldn't exist, and physical changes that matched descriptions of ancient religious figures. And each child, upon reaching their 4th birthday, would disappear without a trace, leaving behind only sand and the lingering scent of burning cedar. The question that haunts the few who know this story is simple. What did the ancients know that we've forgotten? The cuneiform tablets found in Ninsuna's tomb describe death not as an ending, but as a transition, a temporary separation that could be bridged with the right knowledge and the right conditions. They spoke of consciousness as something that could be preserved, transferred, and awakened in new vessels when the time was right. If the story of Myra Ashkenazi is true, then everything we think we know about life, death, and the nature of human consciousness might be wrong. The ancients might not have been primitive people making up stories about gods and spirits. They might have been advanced civilizations that understood aspects of reality that we've lost. And if they're returning now, if children around the world are being born as vessels for ancient consciousnesses, then we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean for humanity? Are we witnessing the return of forgotten gods? Or are we simply the next chapter in a story that began 5,000 years ago in the temples of ancient Mesopotamia? The official records state that Myra Ashkenazi never existed. The hospital has no record of her birth. Columbia University denies that Dr. Sarah Ashkenazi was ever employed there. And the Iraqi government maintains that no archaeological discoveries were made near in the year 2000. But if you know where to look, if you dig deep enough into obscure academic papers and classified archaeological reports, you'll find traces of the truth. You'll find references to the child who spoke the language of the dead, to the tomb that contained impossible knowledge, to the growing number of children around the world who seem to carry the memories of the ancient world in their minds. And if you're very unlucky, you might find yourself waking up one morning with a taste of sand in your mouth and words in a language you've never learned forming on your lips. Words that call out to gods whose names were carved in stone before civilization began. Words that promise the return of a world we thought was gone forever. The ancient Sumerians believed that death was just another country, one from which travelers could return if they knew the right path. If the story of Myra Ashkenazi teaches us anything, it's that some paths are better left untraveled, and some travelers are better left undisturbed. But it might already be too late for that, because somewhere in the world tonight, another child is being born. And when they take their first breath, the words that emerge from their tiny throat won't be cries for comfort or warmth. They'll be the ancient words of power, spoken in languages that died with the fall of empires, carrying memories of temples, and altars and sacrifices made in the name of gods, who are no longer content to remain in the realm of the dead. The ancients are returning, and they're using our children as their gateway back into the world. Sleep well tonight. And if you hear a child speaking in tongues you don't recognize, perhaps it's best not to listen too closely. Some knowledge is too dangerous to possess, and some truths are too terrible to know. The age of the old gods is dawning once again, and this time they're not planning to leave.